What is making the market react today the way that it is? We wake up today, each index down somewhere between 2 and 3%. What is this? Is this the threats of Chinese tariffs on other countries, retaliation on other countries should they negotiate with the U.S.?
It's actually two elements. Number one is trying to figure out how long this negotiation with China will last, the standoff, so to speak. And second, Trump jawboning Powell.
We wake up today, each index down somewhere between 2 and 3%. What is this? Is this the threats of Chinese tariffs on other countries, retaliation on other countries should they negotiate with the U.S.?
It's actually two elements. Number one is trying to figure out how long this negotiation with China will last, the standoff, so to speak. And second, Trump jawboning Powell at the Fed. That's an interesting narrative going on as well. So these two things are destabilizing, and part of one of the issues, obviously, is trying to figure out. The Fed is saying everybody's asking one question now. Will the only thing that matters is how long is the Mexican standoff with China going to last? Because neither country can do without the other. China has to have the consumer market, or everybody in those factories will be unemployed. And frankly, we want to do business with China, but we need it on a level playing field, and they got to stop stealing the IP. Trump gave his list of grievances today. He posted value-added taxes in Europe, but he also listed IP theft, which is a huge problem with China. They just don't care. They just steal IP and they develop products and they dump them back in the U.S. market. All this stuff has to get worked out. So the only question the market's asking is, how long is this going to take? Because Powell can't move without an answer. And frankly, everybody including Walmart and Target, everybody else is trying to figure this thing out. But I'm glad he's doing it. We need to resolve this thing. It's been 20 years. China's been stealing and cheating on the World Trade Organization for 20 years. Let's fix it.
And what's the answer, Kevin? In your estimation, what's the answer to how long this will last, the standoff?
I figure it's going to be another 30 days, probably. It's where's the off-ramp for Xi that he saves face. Same for Trump. But, it's like a game of chicken, two cars going at each other, and they got to find out how this works out. The difference with China versus all the other countries on tariffs, the market doesn't care about the euro negotiation anymore, or England or Switzerland, they're not part of the euro, or Canada, Mexico. It's going to get worked out. It's going to either be 0 or 10% reciprocal, whatever, it doesn't matter. The China deal is more than tariffs. It's the IP theft and access to their markets, and the fact that they raise capital in the U.S. on NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, and they don't even comply with GAAP. And now the new SEC sheriff's in town, this Paul Atkins guy, and he's, for lack of a better word, he's pissed. And he wants to delist these Chinese companies. It's a head squeezer, Will. It's a head squeezer. Right. And the Chinese dudes are going to have to deal with this. And I don't know how this solves itself, but while you have this standoff, there's volatility. But I'm glad, I keep saying it, we got to get over this thing. We can't keep doing this forever. So let's have the vol, solve it. Let's move on.
Really quickly, Kevin, this is macroeconomics we're talking. Let's dive into a little bit of microeconomics before we go. But it's a hugely macro problem, and that's falling birth rates. It's not just here at home in the United States, but across the world. Europe and Japan have seen plummeting birth rates. The United States has as well. Elon Musk has said it's a threat to humanity. New people being born are new ideas being born. And so Donald Trump and the administration have talked about baby bonuses, fertility planning, ways to boost the birth rate here at home. What do you think about this micro policy to persuade women, as the New York Times puts it, to have more children?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Elon's doing a great job making up for the rest of us. I think he's on kid 14 now. Good for him. But, at the end of the day here, the reason people don't have kids earlier, they're expensive. So this is kind of an issue around the cost of living, and education is extremely expensive. So we've got a few things to fix ourselves. Even the Chinese for a while started to think, wait a second, how do we feed all these people? And that goes back to the tariff wars. I mean, we're in a very interesting situation now because people are waiting longer. And I'm having a really interesting narrative with my own kids. And what you learn in life, which is kind of crazy, is when you get older, you realize you wish you had your kids earlier. You try
yes, absolutely.
Of it, but really, family is the best thing you can get in America, and you want to have them early. And if I could go back in time, I would have had them a decade earlier. That's just me talking.
Earlier, for me, Kevin, earlier and more. That's my do-over. Earlier and more when it comes to children. It's the joy of life. All right, so was talking to you, Kevin. Thanks so much for your time.
Take care.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Federal Reserve, President Austin. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to see you, Steve.
So I don't know if you were listening to the last two guests. You got to be listening to Squawk to pay attention to what's going on in the world today. We had Jeremy Siegel on arguing that the market-based surveys of inflation are down or negative, and you can cut all you want. It's not exactly what he said. But then we just had a gentleman on who's making screws and fasteners and all kinds of things, raising his price because of the tariff. So tell me how you balance this as a policymaker, this idea there is not really long-term expectations out of control, but you have people raising prices. What's the right call on policy in that context?
I saw both the segments, and the fastener Dan, he's more like my people out here in the 7th District, which is part of the Midwest and where the manufacturers are. I think that highlights the dynamic that we've got short-run expectations about inflation going up, and people are expressing fear that we're going back to a kind of a 21 or 22 environment where prices are getting too high and inflation is starting to rage a little out of control. But the core long-run expectations not rising, at least in the market variance, I think that's a very important fact. And if you listened closely to what Dan was saying about the fasteners, there was a lot to like about it, in the sense that he was talking about substitutability and adjustment and ways that they could redo the supply chain to get away from some of the worst impacts of the tariff. The more action like that takes place in the private sector, the less impactful tariffs would be on disrupting the supply chain.
So can you cut preemptively to address potential economic weakness?
Look, everything's always on the table. As I say, it's a huge table. But the Fed is supposed to be the steady hand here. What we need to do is look through, get the through line and where are things going to be, let's call it after the 90-day pause and going through the year. Tariffs are one input, they're one shock that happens to the economy, but conditions change all the time. We've got the productivity growth rate has been surprisingly and lovely, in a lovely way, been very strong for a couple of years. I would definitely want us to get a bead on whether tariffs or supply chain disruptions are affecting productivity growth. And we just need to see, most of the U.S. economy is domestically driven, as you know. At the end of the day, imported goods are only 11% of GDP. So unless it jumps out of just its own 11% lane, the impact of tariffs on the macroeconomy could potentially be modest. Now, when I'm out here in the Midwest and we at the Chicago Fed are talking to people, we're the most affected district by tariffs because we're the most manufacturing oriented. And folks have been saying for months that they were nervous about what potential impact would be if the tariffs were too big, that it would kind of throw us back to the 21, 22 period, or even back to the COVID supply disruptions. I kind of think the through line is we've got to get our way through this. You know, out here, if the storm signal goes off, people know, go down in the basement and wait it out. And that's kind of writ large onto the economy. That waited out impulse is the thing that we've just got to get through to figure out what to do.
Austin, the dollar has been a little weaker, bonds a little weaker as well. Does it matter that the president is talking about the potential to terminate the Fed chair?
Look, I'm not going to get into the discussion on that. I know the secretary, I agree with the Secretary of the Treasury when he said Fed independence is a jewel box that we don't want to mess with. All economists, I've been at the Fed for a little over 2 years. Before I was ever at the Fed, I would tell you, economists are basically unanimous that Fed independence is critically important. And to see why, just look at the countries where they don't have Fed independence. Inflation is higher, unemployment is higher, growth is worse. So I think there's a lot of back and forth that is outside the purview of what the Fed, in my opinion, should be doing is following its legal mandate, stabilize prices, maximize employment, and it is the conditions that determine what Fed action are, not anything else.
Mr. President, the recent numbers that if I just were to immediately say, wow, this number matters, it looks to me like inflation is less of a worry right now than a slowdown. Tariffs can cause both. I'm more worried about tariffs causing uncertainty, which becomes self-fulfilling with corporations, and that we really get a possibility of a slowdown. I don't know about a recession. And then on the inflation side, it just seems like a one-shot deal unless there's we get into a tit for tat. It's the second derivative. It's not like the inflation we had 3 years ago. It's not the same. So I think the risks are not equal now for the dual mandate. And that's why I think you believe this in your heart. It'd be nice to preempt the slowdown because these last inflation numbers we got were pretty tame.
I don't know if I didn't have my coffee or what happened, but most of what you said, Joe, I totally agreed with.
That's what I mean.
I don't know what's happening to me?
Because you are MAGA Austin now.
So look, I agree that if you get into the difficult part of a scenario for a central bank is if both sides of the mandate start going wrong at the same time.
Right.
If
but I think
the inflation side does not start going wrong, then
what's more likely than right now? Seems like the slowdown is a bigger risk to me.
It might be, but then it's also about magnitude. So if you started to see inflation going wrong and unemployment going wrong, let's say, right. You would want to know how long is it going to last, and B, you would want to know, well, how much is it getting out of whack on one versus the other? If it was a theoretically pure tariff, let's call it, one-time increase in the price, no retaliation, no follow-up increases, very little in the way of supply chain disruption, then I agree with you. That's a transitory inflation shock. And I've been saying for a long time, if you could just keep it kind of in its lane, most of the U.S. economy is domestically driven, is not dependent on tariffs. I think our uncertainties at this moment and why for me personally, when I hear Jeremy saying preemptive cuts, we're getting announced retaliation. We're talking about revisiting the tariffs in 90 days. and we don't know what the impact on the supply chain is going to be. So I think we want to be a little more the steady hand and trying to figure out the through line before we're jumping to action.
Austin, you point out that your district is the one that is the manufacturing hub of the United States. You feel these things more deeply. Do you think that the tariffs can do what the president has laid out as a goal, which is to reinvigorate manufacturing, particularly in the Midwest? Do you see that happening?
That's a longer run effort, and I applaud the effort that if we're going to increase manufacturing, it partly depends how this negotiation chain with other countries is going to go. You saw the Secretary of the Treasury say that he thought, and when this period was over, it was going to reintroduce, he called it the golden age of global trade. If on the back end of this, we got new agreements and the productivity growth remained high, I think you could see a rebound of manufacturing for sure. In the short run.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to give the example of steel, where we put in tariffs on steel, which you would think would be fostering the domestic production of steel. But you've seen a series of domestic steel producers actually start some layoffs because the demand is not there, because the tariffs are hurting their customers more than they're helping their cost side.
Austin, I wanted to ask you a separate question. You referenced Scott Bessent a couple of times now, once talking about the independence of the Fed, another in the context now of tariffs. But a different reference would be prior to President Trump's election, he talked about putting in place effectively a shadow Fed chair, or at least nominating somebody, naming somebody early, and that this idea that somehow the market would look through it. This was his proposal, not somebody else's. Of course, now he has to deal with Jay Powell every week.
Kind of backed off, right?
I know he's backed off of it, but he's the one who introduced it. And so the question, though, now is, given that the president is back to the idea of terminating the Fed chair, whether you think there's a possibility that you would nominate or that he could nominate somebody early, and what do you think that does in terms of the way the bond market behaves?
It sounds like you're asking for political scenario analysis from a guy with an econ PhD.
No, it's not a political scenario.
No.
It's let's say there was somebody that was announced in the fall, and that person was sort of known to be dovish, if that's what the president wanted. Do you think that it's possible that the bond market or bond investors would, quote unquote, look through whoever is there in the interim to somehow get to the other side? It's not a political question.
I would ask you know far more about what bondholders and investors' sentiment is than I do. I'm just down here trying to fulfill the dual mandate, voting on stabilizing prices and maximizing employment. I don't want to get into all the machinations that you're describing. Right. Jay Powell is a Fed chair. I'm a strong supporter of the FOMC. As sitting at the table, I can tell you it's my opinion that is now the world's greatest deliberative body.
So, one just real quick follow-up, which is, how important is the Fed chair themselves to the conversations you have at that table? Meaning, if somebody walks in the door and is extremely dovish or is extremely hawkish, and they are running that meeting, that ultimately would be the outcome.
Well, I mean, it's a vote, but the chair is by far the most important person sitting around the table, and their opinion carries a lot of weight. I think that's been hard earned from Volcker forward. You've seen the chairs express their opinion and maintain credibility. So whoever is the Fed chair, I imagine, is going to be a strong name and somebody that will carry weight for sure.
Right. But Austin, I wonder if it might be worth to look at the real reasons for Fed independence, which is nothing to do really with the short-term call you make, because you guys, you get it right sometimes and you get it wrong sometimes. And maybe the president knows exactly what the right interest rate ought to be right now. But isn't there a long-term issue here in terms of how Fed independence underpins the value of the dollar and the value of the whole bond market, in that if you get it wrong, you're going to correct yourself either way. Whereas if you are subservient to an administration, and this is not theoretical, because we went through these bouts in the 70s where the Fed got it wrong and didn't correct itself until somebody else was appointed and came in. So isn't that really the issue, is the long-term credibility of the Fed, not the way it operates within a cycle?
Yeah, probably. I mean, for the most part, and I think that's a different way of saying that, of explaining why we tend to look at long-run inflation expectations, and the fact that when short-run inflation was almost double digits a few years ago, but the long-run expectations that the Fed would get inflation back down to the 2% target were critically important. Fed independence is critically important for that. As you know, Paul Volcker was a dear friend of mine. And his widow, when he died, gave me that original 2x4 that they mailed to him that says, please lower these insane interest rates. And I keep that on the shelf right next to my desk to remind me, A, when we go to the FOMC meeting, it affects the real economy, but B, sometimes the Fed has to do the hard job. And that's, if you look around the world, the reason why in countries where there is not Fed independence or central bank independence, the inflation rate is higher, is because when there is interference over the long run, it's going to mean higher inflation. It's going to mean worse growth and higher unemployment, because there's just going to be a little less willingness to step up and do the hard things when the moment is tough.
Austin, do you like the new Austin? I mean, is it a better place not talking? I mean, we used to talk politics all the time, and you loved it, and you loved it, and you were so ready.
I grudgingly accepted your terms, Joe.
When you stop doing what you're doing now, are you going back to the old, or are you like St. Paul? Are you different? You get knocked off a horse, and you just are just totally.
Did Joe just say I'm like a saint? Joe just said I was like a saint. I'm impressed, Joe.
You know that story? I think he was Saul before.
Yeah, I know that.
Hey, just real quick, Austin, you had said before.
He didn't answer.
That, yeah, I know. I'm bailing him out, I guess. Austin, real quick.
I think he likes the new Austin better.
That you think that rates 12 to 18 months from now will be lower from where they are today. Are you sticking with that?
I still think that, because I think we're going to get through. There's a lot of noise, a lot of dust in the air. But at the fundamentally coming into April, we had unemployment right around 4%, which is pretty much stable full employment, and inflation was in the mid twos and coming down. And if we can just get back on that path, I think that the long run settling point for rates, you can see in the dot plot, is well below where we are today. So I think we're going to get through the noise and can get back on that.
Austin, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys again.
Austin Goolsbee.
Mr. President.
Right on time, right at the market open. People,
I mean, Dow's down 11.
who took longs, who took shorts? Let me know. This thing's gonna come down to TP1, maybe TP2. It'll come back up, and then around 10:30, we have our second entry for the shorts. Same exact price. So we're either going to have a retest for the longs at 10:30 or the retest for the shorts. Most likely retest for the shorts, but let's see what we got. Okay, Sam, Christine, JLP. So I would secure, I was going to say secure partial profits at TP1, but I'm confident we get one more push to TP1. Let's see if we get that push through. Hopefully you guys secured some partials. Did you guys secure partials? Holding the full trade? What are you guys doing?
We are here at the Chevron Leadership Initiatives Commission, champions of women in
Trust. It's the market open, big push to the downside. I think we have that continuation at TP2, and then maybe one more push, kind of through the holds, like all of Asia session and London session highs. I think we break through and then come all the way down, but I think we go down first, then break through, then follow through. Okay. Trade is valid until we close above 18,053. So have some confidence. saddle up, and yeah, keep your eye on the ball.
Sport event. Joining us right now is Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon. He's here because Goldman Sachs has an interest in women's sports and in the LPGA in particular. But David,
What the fuck did I just click on? I saw David Solomon's. I didn't know we were talking about some women's sports, bro. Hold on.
Felt in Davos, but it was very, very different. You were coming into the inauguration. Certainly have changed the level of uncertainty in markets. Markets are looking to reprice the value of things based on the uncertainty they have around what these policies will ultimately look like and how they will ultimately be implemented. And that is therefore causing shifts in fund flows on a very significant basis. And I think one of the things that's different about what we're seeing right now is normally when asset prices, when equities reprice, it's not surprising when you go into a more uncertain environment that equities reprice. But generally when they do, people buy US Treasuries. But here we're seeing different behavior because at the margin, people that have been very, very inclined towards US dollar assets are slightly shifting their preferences. And I'd say it's still at the margin, but as people are selling equities, that puts downward pressure on the dollar, given these are all US equities. You've got investors around the world buying US equities. And as they de-risk to some degree, that's putting pressure on the dollar. And that obviously has an impact on treasuries. So the level of uncertainty is high. I think it's good that there's been a delay, let's say, in the implementation of these reciprocal tariffs, but we still don't know what these deals are going to look like, where it's going to land, and what the ultimate impact on business will be. And so what's happening is business is pulling back. People are pulling back because they want to wait and see. They want a higher level of certainty before they make decisions and they move forward.
so you think this delay is good? You think it's good because it gives it a chance for them to undo some of those actions and activities?
I would say the delay is good because this was all happening very, very quickly. And, I think these are complicated issues and we need more time to see what the ultimate result will be. I think one of the things about the delay is the delay didn't decrease the level of uncertainty. In fact, in some ways, the delay increased the level of uncertainty. And so until businesses and individuals all over the world, not just here in the United States, can understand our trade policy, how it's going to be implemented, and that allows people to step back and make decisions about their capital spending, their investment, their planning. We can understand relationships in global markets with respect to the dollar. Until we settle down and get to a place that can understand that, we're going to see a higher level of volatility and continued pressure on U.S. asset prices.
So you say this is around the margins, just in terms of investors having less faith in the United States and other places. Do you think that this, because some people get hyperbolic about this and think that this is the end of the American exceptionalism when it comes to the markets. Do you think that's the case?
Well, I've been talking to clients of.
All right, there we go. This is your second chance to close partial profits.
United Refining Company.
This is your second chance to close partial profits. Told you guys keep your eye on the ball here, but there it is again. Wow. If you're holding a runner, that's the second TP is, I mean, you guys know what TP2 is, but here's the previous high. We've broken through. We did have a closure of the bodies above the previous highs. So over here, we have the body of the candles. We closed above. So what happens next is typically a pullback and a continuation. So the closure doesn't mean the market's going to move in one direction and just keep pushing to the upside. The closure above the previous high confirms that buyers are stepping in. Basically, the market is willing to bid the NASDAQ 100 at a higher price than it was previously willing to bid it. So in this session, obviously we bid all the way up to this high, but the market closed right here, 18,030. So you guys can see that the market is willing to bid the price higher than before, showing, there's more buying interest, etc. And so what will typically follow is a major pullback, kind of take everybody out of their trades, grab some liquidity from early buyers or people who have tight stops. I'd like to see this thing push a little bit lower and then continue to the upside. So basically whatever the arrows are doing here, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Push to the downside first, then liquidity grab, and then the real move, which I believe is the sells. Let's see what we got here.
More marketing dollars. Take your choice. Companies that are nervous about situations that don't know what's going to happen in the future. And there's a lot.
Put the money in the business. We're going through it. However,
I'm still optimistic that they're going to accelerate this process.
Oh, apparently there was another leak from some signals group chat or something. The story is pretty tough to follow, but from what I can gather, this all happened before his confirmation hearing. This was months ago. They fired a bunch of staff members over the weekend for leaking a bunch of documents. And then obviously that signaled a bunch of red flags, gave the deep state machine something to sink their teeth into. And now they're running with this story. But let's see what's going on here.
Why do you have confidence?
Because he's doing a great job. Great job. Ask the Houthis how he's doing. Everybody's happy with it. We have the highest recruitment numbers.
That's crazy. He said, ask the Houthis how he's doing. They're talking about Pete Hegseth. You know, a week and a half ago, there was a leak in the Signals group chat that they were in. Some people claimed that they were leaking war plans. They said they didn't. Then there was a strike, the same strike that they were discussing in the group chat on the Houthis, bombed the shit out of them. And they're asking him, how, what do you think about Pete Hegseth's performance so far? He said, ask the Houthis how he's doing. So this is fucking crazy. That was a bar.
I think they've had in 28 years. No, he's doing a great job. It's just fake news.
Well, that was President Trump doubling down on his support for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth 24 hours ago, denying a New York Times report about sharing sensitive information on another signal chat called Team Huddle. Here to set the record straight himself, the current Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, former host right here on Fox and Friends. Pete,
hey,
great
Brian.
To see you, Mr. Secretary.
Great to see you.
So your thoughts on what's been reporting of Team Huddle and the signal chat that the New York Times says took place between you, your wife, and your brother and some others?
So, Brian, if you remember when this all started, the first go around, because this is the second go around, right? They peddle old stuff, they kick it back up. I said repeatedly, no one's texting war plans. You know why I said that? Because I'm in the bowels of the Pentagon every single day. Just 10 minutes ago, I was looking at actual war plans of things that were ongoing or pending things to happen, because that's on a regular basis on classified systems. That's my job for the war fighters, for the President of the United States. I look at war plans every single day. What was shared over Signal then and now, however you characterize it, was informal, unclassified coordinations for media coordination and other things. That's what I've said from the beginning. At the beginning, it was left-wing reporters from The Atlantic who got a hold of it and then wanted to create a problem for the president. This is what it's all about, trying to get at President Trump and his agenda. Now, here at the Defense Department, because, Brian, I want this to be very clear. We take the classification of information very important. It's very significant to us that we safeguard it. And so when we had leaks, which we have had here, we did a serious leak investigation. And through that leak investigation, unfortunately, we found some folks that we believe were not holding to the protocols that we hold dear here at the Defense Department. Through that investigation, they have been moved on, and that investigation continues. As a result,
People, as long as it doesn't close above the previous high, still valid. You guys know the drill. The market will push through the 88.6. It'll come up for the double tops. So account for these in, obviously your risk management plan, how you execute, whether you're going to put a tester entry and then you're going to put a heavier entry at the double top. Ooh. Well, that was more aggressive than I thought. Okay. No worries. Did anybody move to break even? Did you guys secure partials at least on the first two pumps down or no?
Yeah, I did.
Beautiful. What about the rest of you guys who were in the trade? Christine, JLP, the rest of you guys?
I took that buy on the retest.
Brother, it's coming back.
Yeah.
Let's not
We'll see.
The buy.
I got in at 18,121 on top step.
Okay, there you go. I mean, it's pumping now. I think it'll pump to the extension levels and then come back in. I have to double check if there's though. George says, I got partials and stopped at BE. There we go, George. That's what I'm talking about. Walter says partials. Did you protect or no, Walter?
result of that, Everything we do here is above board, trying to make sure that we safeguard information. In this point, those folks who were leaking, who have been pushed out of the building, are now attempting to leak and sabotage the president's agenda and what we're doing. And that's unfortunate. It's not what I do. It's not how we operate. And so you've got another allegation being pushed again, not based on how we're operating around here. We're for the warfighters, we're for the president, and none of this is based in reality.
So, Mr. Secretary, I guess
I don't know, man. That doesn't sound too convincing to me. I'm just throwing that out there. Also, I'm very confident the market will come back through. So let this thing pump. Let it push to whatever extension level it's going to push to. On the way back in, as soon as it goes to close below the previous high right here, there's a shorting opportunity right here at the previous highs. Let me clean this up just slight here. This is going to be easier to just go like this. Let me just clean this up a little bit. Okay, so market's going to go hit an extension level. On the way back in, it's going to create like a false break and retest of the previous high. On that retest right here is going to be the shorting opportunity. There's going to be a retest of the highs. It'll come back down to the low where the market kind of like started pushing where that support is. So there's going to be a long opportunity down here for the retest. And there's going to be a shorting opportunity. Once the market comes back for that break and retest, it's going to do a little pump at the previous area of resistance, shorting opportunity here, and long opportunity down here. Make sense? Put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense. Pretty straightforward.
I can conclude this. We know some bizarre situation with Michael Waltz happened with the first time the whole thing with the Signal app came out. You believe this came out, they said it was called Team Huddle, because one of the people who work for you, one of the 3 who no longer are there, leaked this out as a way to get back at you?
That's right, Brian. When you dismiss people who you believe are leaking classified information, and again, the investigation is ongoing and that will take time, and when the evidence produced, it will go to DOJ, why would it surprise anybody, Brian, if those very same people...
By the way, I'll be filtering, I'll kind of be flipping through different charts. I have the 4-hour chart over here. This is the big picture of what we're seeing. We're in a higher time frame range. Hit potentially a support level. I think that, there's a chance for us to go a little bit lower. But right now we're in this correction. Okay, little pump off the daily zone. And then I want to see it push all the way back down to the bottom of that daily range. This is going to be a prime time buying opportunity. Let's see if the market's feeling generous enough to give us that buy opportunity. So I'll be flipping through different time frame charts just so you guys are aware. The first trade that we were taking was, very, very small time frame scalp. We had taken a 5-minute scalp pre-market open for the longs. And then I tried for the shorts at the high of London over here, or the high of Tokyo, excuse me. Didn't really work out. Now we're seeing a massive pump to the upside. Let's see if the market is going to come back into the range.
People keep leaking to the very same reporters whatever information they think they can have to try to sabotage the agenda of the president or the secretary. So once a leaker, always a leaker, often a leaker. And so we looked for leakers because we take it very seriously. And we will do the investigation. Right. And if those people are exonerated, fantastic. We don't think, based on what we understand, that it's going to be a good day for a number of those individuals because of what was found in the investigation. So if they want to keep leaking and pushing and peddling things that try to sabotage the president's agenda, that's unfortunate. But that's how leaking works in this town. We're focused on recruiting, on rooting out DEI, on securing our southwest border, on the president's agenda, and it's going very well at the Pentagon, and I'm proud of it.
Right. So the Signal app is what everyone uses. We're all finding that out now because of the Chinese have infected and sabotaged, gotten involved in almost every other communications apparatus over the last 4 years. So that's what you're communicating. You say it took place, but there was no classified material in it. Over the last few days, your senior advisor, Dan Caldwell, Darren Selnick, Colin Carroll, who was chief of staff, deputy secretary of defense. The other one, Darren, is now former deputy chief of staff, will let go. Did you let them go?
Right. It was a result of an investigation ongoing at the Pentagon where we identified there was sufficient evidence, potentially, again, there's an investigation ongoing that will have to complete itself, sufficient evidence to believe that they or others near them were party to leaking. And then I have a statutory responsibility, Brian, if I believe that's the case, to ultimately ensure they no longer have access to that and that the investigation commences. There are a lot of ways to communicate in this building. I do it every day. I was just doing it this morning. Official channels by which we communicate classified information. If you want to do it and do it the right way, you should. If we think you are leaking to the press, that's a very real problem. We take that very seriously at the Pentagon. I'm here to do one job. One job for the president and the American people. Secure the country. America first, peace through strength. I don't have time for leakers. I don't have time for the hoax press that peddles old stories from disgruntled employees. We should be talking about the decimation of the Houthis, how we're pushing back the Chinese, how we have a new defense area at the southern border. Instead, disgruntled former employees are peddling things to try to save their ass.
Did you?
And ultimately, that's it's not going to work.
Mr. Secretary, did you find this out, or did they come to you? Because I know you know these guys. Like these are the guys you picked, especially Caldwell, and they worked for you for your previous job before you got over to Fox. And they said that they have not been asked for their phones. They weren't asked about communications. They didn't go through. They didn't take a polygraph. So why would they be let go and not be investigated?
Well, Brian, when there were a series of serious leaks at the Pentagon, which there were, Panama Canal plans, Elon Musk's visit, you name it, any number of things, and there's 4 or 5, 6, 7 things. We said enough is enough. We're gonna launch a leak investigation, which we did, which was then handed over to OSI, which is the special investigators here at DOD. Right. Through that investigation, information was surfaced, which created a responsibility to take action. That's how it works when you actually investigate leaks, Brian. So it's easy to say, oh, we asked everybody and everybody said they're good. Or you can take it seriously and say, we don't think leaks are okay at this department. So we're going to investigate. And when we investigate, we'll take it anywhere it leads. And unfortunately, Brian, to your point, and again, if 1 or 2 of these guys is exonerated after an investigation, great. That's what investigations are for. But we took it seriously. It led to some unfortunate places, people I have known for quite some time, but it's not my job to protect them. It's my job to protect national security, the president of the United States, and let the investigation go where it is. So when that evidence is gathered sufficiently, and this has all happened very quickly, it will be handed over to DOJ, and those people will be prosecuted if necessary. The leakers know who they are, and we know over time the truth will be told, and we stand firm behind that. Leaking is not okay in national security policy, and we will stand behind that every day of the week.
It looks like Carroll and Selnick intend to sue for wrongful termination. And again, they didn't ask to take a polygraph test. Do you know Joe Casper? Is he still your chief of staff? Is he leaving?
Oh, Joe's a great guy. He's a great American. He has done a fantastic job for us at the Defense Department, securing the southwest border, getting a beachhead here at the Pentagon. He's staying with us, going to be in a slightly different role, but he's not going anywhere, certainly not fired. You make changes over time, and we're grateful for everything Joe's done.
So as you know, one of the people that left, he says he was not fired, he let go. Other people said he was fired. John Hewlett, a former Pentagon spokesperson, decided to put this in Politico and say, here's a quote, "It's been a month of total chaos at the Pentagon, from leaks of sensitive operational plans to mass firings. The dysfunctional, now a major distraction for the president, deserves better from his senior leadership. President Donald Trump has a strong record on holding his top officials to account. Given that, it's hard to see Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth remaining in his role for much longer." You know him. I know he was let go. He had a great idea to get rid of Jackie Robinson, being sarcastic, from the Pentagon. Your thoughts about that statement?
Anybody that knows John knows why we let him go. We did a lot of favors for John. He did some good work up front. Then he was moved along and asked to move along. Now he's misrepresented a lot of things in the press. It's unfortunate. We did right by him. We tried to help. He's spinning it otherwise. It's too bad. It's politics, I guess.
Mr. Secretary, do you think you take this job, you come in with war experience and all your great background, do you think there's a lot of people who don't want you there, and there's some type of deep state forces that want to make sure you don't stay there?
They've come after me from day one, just like they've come after President Trump. I mean, I've gotten a fraction of what President Trump got in that first term. What he's endured is superhuman. It's not hard for me to do this job. I know exactly why I'm here. To bring war fighting and the war fighting ethos back to the Pentagon, to rip out the insidious ideologies and not compromise and not back down, to bring in new press voices into the Pentagon, which we've done, to reestablish standards and accountability, to not tolerate leakers, to 100% operational control of our border, to get rid of trans lunacy in the military. We haven't backed down. See, here's the thing. A lot of people come to Washington and they just play the game. And it's you punch their ticket and get along to go along and, you know, start doing meet the press and going to the Council on Foreign Relations and spending time with all the new cocktail sipping crowd. That's not why I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, I don't know what they're saying he did, bro. He probably did that shit.
Results from the All America Economic Survey on tariffs just in time, I'd say, because just sports is quiet.
I'm just joking. Look, they're just putting on a show because they got caught leaking, and so they found some story from like 2 months ago, and decided to fire some people because they launched a whole investigation of who's leaking this stuff out the Pentagon, which is a pretty serious offense. Let's be honest, it's the fucking Pentagon. You can't be leaking war plane. You know, it's not good. And they're making it a whole thing. So, point of advice for everybody who's listening: if you're not, if you haven't had your tinfoil hat on long enough, okay, quick point of advice. Whenever you see some shit like this that's kind of pointless and they're turning it into a massive story, always ask yourself, what is happening, what's happening on the other side over here that's maybe the attention is being taken away from? Like, what are they trying to distract us from? Is there a hearing that's going on? Is there a confirmation? Is there a Supreme Court ruling? Is there some kind of massive, file dump from one of these investigations? Because this Pete Hegseth shit, I couldn't care less. All right, let's see what CNBC has to say. 49% tariffs across the board is a bad idea. Yeah, I think we know that. No one's claiming 49% across the board. Maybe Jamie Dimon has something interesting to say. What do you guys think? Let's see, because everyone's talking about how, Trump and Jerome Powell are beefing. Trump wants Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. Let's think about this. If the economy's doing fine right now, okay? Yes, there's some tariff pressures, but that's gonna cause inflation. The tariff pressures is gonna cause a slowdown in productivity, and it's gonna cause inflation. That's called stagflation. It's a stagnation of economic productivity and inflation at the same time. Not a good combo. So Trump is basically saying if you lower interest rates, then we can stimulate the economy and we won't have the slowdown in productivity, which is very useful for Trump's plan. But on the other hand, because of these tariffs, there's going to be short-term transitory inflation. And if you lower interest rates in an environment where we're not in a recession, like things are going fine, if you lower interest rates, it's going to make inflation go up. This is the whole Bidenomics thing, where like inflation's already high and you want to print money and you want to lower interest rates at the same time. No. Keep interest rates high until something breaks. That's kind of like the well understood policy for economics. That's the mechanics, people. If the economy and the product, let's just say like GDP is still operating at a very stable rate, it's still neutral. It hasn't taken a big dip in productivity yet. Obviously, we haven't seen the numbers since these tariffs have gone into effect. And keep in mind, most of the tariffs have not gone into effect. Like we said 10% across the board, that's active. But all of these retaliatory tariffs that we put on these countries, they've all been walked back. There was a 90-day pause, as you guys remember last week. And so none of these tariffs have actually gone into effect except for China. But then there was an exemption on technology products and some car manufacturers. So really, Trump is just trying to get car manufacturing back in America. And these other tariffs, none of them have really gone into effect. So yeah, long story short, I think that China has to look strong in front of their people. We have to look strong. Trump has to make it look like he has the dominant hand in the negotiations on, America's behalf. And they're just going to keep going back and forth. Now, like Trump never makes a deal because in the Art of the Deal, the book he wrote, you always have to give an off ramp to the person you're negotiating with, because if they can't go back empty-handed, especially after having gone through short-term economic pain, which they might go through. And so they're going to have to come back with something. And as long as Trump has thought that many steps ahead and he already has an idea of what we can offer the Chinese government and in exchange for, let's just say, fair trade practices, them respecting intellectual property laws, them respecting international trade laws, I think that we can reach some kind of negotiation here. I don't think Trump is just like kind of shooting at the wind and seeing what happens. I think they have a bigger plan for China. This is what it's been about the whole time. Take our manufacturing back piece by piece, build ourselves up while they take the short-term hit, and let's see if they come through to negotiate.
I do object to this Wall Street thing because who is Wall Street? We're owned by veterans, retirees, pension.
All right. Yeah, this man, Jamie, talking about some JP Morgan's owned by retirees. Yeah, you're retired. You're rich. Chevron CEO Mike Wirth. Let's see what Chevron has to say. Surprised they're still in business.
We've been talking about investing in women's sports here in Houston at the.
Why is every single CNBC thing I've clicked on today talking about some women's sports? I clicked on Goldman Sachs CEO and Chevron CEO. What the fuck is happening in women's sports, people? Excuse my language. Look, I know it's the morning. I know some of you guys are at work. You can't hear bad words. I get it. What the fuck is going on with women's sport? This is the third one.
Chevron Leadership Initiative.
This better get better.
Commission Champions of Women in Sport event. Also in just a couple of days, the Chevron kicks off. It is the first of the major championships on the LPGA Tour. Joining us right now is Chevron CEO Mike Wirth. And Mike, it is great to see you. It's great to be here. Before we talk women's sports, I want to talk about the business of the markets today and what we're seeing. And I think the biggest issue people are watching in your industry right now is the price of oil. WTI below $64 a barrel. It's getting dangerously close to $60. I just wonder if you think this is because of what's happening in the economy and the drop in demand, or if you think that this is more of an issue of the extra production that's coming on from OPEC Plus, or both.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you, Becky, and really appreciate you being here for our big event. It's a little bit of both in oil markets. There's been an expectation for reduced demand as a result of some of the reaction here to the tariff and trade issues that we've seen. And that's been matched at the same time by a decision from OPEC Plus to start to bring production back into the market faster than they had originally indicated. And against that backdrop, we've got growth in some non-OPEC countries around the world as well. And so you're seeing at this point probably more an expectation than any data that would say the reality that demand is slowing and that supply will be growing at a rate that's different than what the market had previously been priced in. So prices have come off into the 60s, and we'll see where they go, I think, in response to how both of these things evolve in the coming weeks.
How does that volatility and the lower prices for oil, how does that impact your CapEx, your plans for capital expenditure spendings?
Well, in a commodity business, we have to always be prepared for.
Look, April 2nd is the day that the tariffs went into effect, right? Look at this. The day that the tariffs went into effect, look what happened to the price of oil. I'm starting to think that this whole thing was about bringing the price of energy down. That way, energy is one of the largest components of inflation. Obviously, when they look at core inflation, they look at PCE, they're looking more at consumer goods. But if you're looking at headline inflation, then energy cost is one of the largest components. And so literally April 2nd, 6 a.m., that's when this thing just dumped out of the sky. And they're saying that, kind of we're seeing a channel right here. They're saying that it's more likely to break back to the downside with these tariffs right now rather than rebound back up. So we'll see. But oil has definitely taken a major hit. On April 2nd, it was sitting at about $72 a barrel, dropped all the way down to $55 a barrel, now sitting somewhere in between about 63. So, we're seeing gas prices start to come down, and this is a forward-looking or leading indicator of what you're going to pay at the gas station. All right, so this continuing to drop to the downside, we're going to start to see sub $3 gas, and it's going to be a very active summer, which will obviously stimulate economic activity.
Uncertainty and really in our business for the risk of a down cycle. So you maintain a very strong balance sheet. Our balance sheet, we've got lower debt than we historically have carried. We're AA credit. We actually reduced our capital spending by $1 billion a year coming into 2025. We also announced $2 to $3 in cost reductions that we intend to deliver over the next 2 years. And that at a $70 oil price, along with some growth that we've got in our business, leads to $10 billion of incremental free cash flow growth over 25 and 26. And even at a $60 price, that's at $70, but at $60, we expect $9 billion in free cash flow growth. So capital discipline, cost discipline, and balance sheet strength are fundamental in a cyclical commodity business, and that's how we've got our company set up.
But will lower oil prices impact how much you spend on exploration this year?
You know, our spending is really geared towards a longer term view.
That was a stupid question.
On prices. And short term, we've got to deal with volatility in markets, but we can't really swing our capital spending based on the price of today. It has to be based on our view of price out into the future. And our fundamental views on longer term supply, demand, technology, policy are really unchanged. And so our longer term view of prices are what drive our capital spending.
Does that mean you don't think we're headed into a recession in your plans at this point?
You know, there's no signs that we see at this point that we're
Wait. Let him say it louder. Let him say it louder. Hold on. We've been saying this on this stream and everywhere. We've been saying this. Hold on.
Longer term real prices are what drive our.
I'll wait for her to ask it
Does that
again.
mean you don't think we're headed into a recession in your plans at this point?
You know, there's no signs that we see at this point that we're in or close to a recession.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And again, we have to always be prepared for that.
Yes, sir.
But ours is a long cycle business. The capital we put to work in our business isn't there for just a few years. It's typically there for decades. So we really have to take a longer view. And
Chevron, an American oil company talking about investing for decades. Look, in case you guys don't get the joke, basically all the major industries in America, airlines, let's just say aerospace manufacturers, defense contractors, oil companies have all been consolidated over the years. And so, you know, there used to be 20, 30, 50. Now, you know, then it was 10. And then now there's 3. You know, we have Boeing, we have Airbus, and we have, that's basically it. In terms of the manufacturing for planes. Then we have, in terms of the oil monopolies, we got Chevron, we got Shell, and we have, I guess, well, BP is British. Chevron, Shell, you guys get the fucking other ones. But long story short, there's always going to be a massive consolidation. So for the oil industry that's literally they're at war right now with the climate change initiative. That's, you know, I'm saying BlackRock has sort of been investing their money in these DEI initiatives and pushing back on the oil industry. And talking about investing in decades is very bold. Just throwing that out there, especially with oil getting crushed.
And not get buffeted too much by short-term market movements.
Although even those longer-term plans, things can get upended. I'm thinking of Venezuela, where you were doing production and the Trump administration has now ordered you all to withdraw from that by May. Was that a huge surprise to you? What does it mean longer term?
Well, the first priority for us in Venezuela is the safety of our people and protecting the environment. We've seen sanctions in place on Venezuela from the first Trump administration through the Biden administration. And now again, as President Trump is back in office, the terms of those sanctions have evolved a little bit over time as the U.S. pursues its policy objectives. So we work closely with the Department of Treasury to understand what they're trying to achieve and make sure they understand the potential unintended.
The policy objectives are regime change. Venezuela is a very hotbed is a very hot spot for corruption. They're one of the largest oil producers in the world, but they've had a lot of issues with leadership. And so America, you know, there may or may not have been an American-backed coup, and now Venezuela may or may not be, you know, kind of in the pocket of the U.S. These are the things that happen. All right, we got to protect the petrodollar hegemony. as long as we can. And so the U.S. foreign policy that these corporations are referring to is regime change, and the major corporations are all, I don't want to say in on the joke, is kind of like a crude way to say it, but they're all in on the joke. They know what this means for their business, and they're definitely planning ahead. So on the higher time frames here, I basically just tried to line up my fibs with areas of support resistance, areas of support. We have the 78 lineup. So now we're at that 88.6. We may see a rejection at that zone, but it's not the strongest level. The market may come up to retest 88% of the larger impulse. So the one from like 3-4 days ago. All right. So if we don't get a rejection here at this 88.6, if anyone wants to go try for this, then this thing's going to continue up to retest the previous highs all the way up here. Shorting against an aggressive market like this, I don't know how I feel about that personally. I would let this go. I'm not going to take this short, but we'll keep this on here. We'll paper trade this, and yeah, let's see if this thing ends up playing out.
It impacts of some of the changes. And so we'll work with them to understand the rules and then inform them of how we can continue to keep important supply flowing to the United States, which our refineries in the U.S. actually need.
Is that to say that you are in discussions with them still, or at this point to try and extend because I think it was May you were supposed to be out of Venezuela.
May was a wind down on crude oil sales.
Okay.
And then there are other terms that we've never been through this period I've described over the last several years, actually in a position where we've been forced to leave the country. And we believe our presence there is good for the long term for the people of Venezuela. And so,
does anybody here believe that Chevron's presence in Venezuela is for the benefit of the Venezuelan people? Does anybody here think that? That the Chevron CEO is in Venezuela because he's a charitable guy. The guy's got a great heart. He's looking out for the Venezuelan people. Look at Chevron.
but we'll work to try to maintain that position. We're the last American company still on the ground in this industry there. Others that have come in are from China, from Russia, from other countries. And we think it's important for America to have some representation in Venezuela for the long term.
How are your discussions going, not just on Venezuela, but with the administration in general? We had David Solomon on a little bit ago, and he was saying that there is a free flow of communication with administration officials, at least in his business.
Absolutely. That's what we're seeing. And, we deal with people like Secretary Burgum at the Department of Interior, Secretary Wright at the Department of Energy, two very well-qualified individuals for the roles that they're in, and frequent dialogue. They understand the energy sector. They're very engaged with business, and we see that across many of the other cabinet officials as well. So the engagement has been very good.
What do you feel about the messaging that gets out to the business community, I guess, with things like tariffs? I'm not sure the tariffs impact you greatly. Obviously, you have projects that are outside the United States, but are those?
I don't think that tariffs impact you greatly, she says to the CEO of Chevron. So we're bringing the gas in from Venezuela, and we're taxing the shit out of Venezuela. But this shouldn't impact your industry. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, let's turn this into something positive, right? Because I'm trying to turn over a new leaf. You guys are sitting there at home trying to find some motivation for today. This is it. Just know you can make it in America. Very successful. With no brain cells. You can be a fucking moron and make it in this country. Let that be your motivation for today. If she can do it, so can you.
Is impacted by the tariff discussions?
So we're not heavily impacted by tariffs, not certainly as heavily as some other industries are. Energy has been exempted from a number of the tariffs because of its vitality to our economy. And so the effects that we feel are likely to be more the macroeconomic effects as they flow through the economy.
Yeah.
We are exposed to certain supply chains where we source goods and materials from other countries, but we're in a position to largely, I think, manage that pretty well. And so the bigger issue would be, what does it mean for growth and kind of global trade, and how does that evolve?
I think Joe has a question for you too, back from studio.
Morning, Joe.
Hey, Mike, it's just about the current environment and whether you really do notice any differences. There was a time when the majors were more interested in returning, it seems like, cash to shareholders, whether it was through buybacks or dividends or whatever. I think that all shifted. And now I'm just wondering, are you more comfortable with a 10 or 15-year capital deployment plan, or could it all change again in 3.5 years from now?
Well, first of all, I've got to say the policy messaging we've been getting for energy, I think has been very helpful for the U.S. We've got energy resources that are unparalleled in the world if you look across the entire energy complex. And I think the administration understands that American energy abundance can underpin economic prosperity. It can also help with the electricity that's going to be required for the growth in data centers to support AI. We've got abundant natural gas here, which will be part of that solution. So I think we're seeing an approach that says we want to leverage.
So you guys know, with our strategy around 10:20, or basically between 10 a.m. and 11:20, we're going to have some kind of reversal or some kind of retest during New York session. And so that is coming up now. We could be seeing the shorts coming back down, and there could be some potential re-entry opportunities for the longs. If we see a big pullback here to the short side, I'm very confident that we can pick up some entries. And I think the price is just basically going to ping pong in the same range. So it's going to have a big impulse, to start off the session, then have a nice pullback. And then the second half of the session, we see a rise back up, either the highs of the session or, price just continues to consolidate right where the market opened. All right. So that's kind of what I'm looking at here. We're about 45 minutes after market open. And so that reversal trade should be coming in the next 20 minutes. So keep an eye for that. If you guys are going to be shorting, make sure to trail your stop losses. Make sure to keep an eye out for any potential continuations, and then save some ammo in case the market wants to come up to a higher retest zone. I kind of redrew some of the fibs a few different ways, but trade's still valid.
This for economic prosperity, for energy security and national security, and we can.
Oh, also, I just got this alert on my phone. Breaking news: Jerome Powell just said, this is breaking news. Hold on, let me read this. Jerome Powell just said, click the link in the description to get access to the NASDAQ Masterclass. Registration for May now open. Use code Easter50 expiring tomorrow. That was clean. And so is this trade once it drops.
Work to reduce emissions and also, improve the environmental performance of the energy sector. So
Walter, they're getting better. I'm just going to say, I'm getting better and better.
All those are good things. We've been around since just after the Civil War. And so we've seen administrations and policies evolve in our sector over the long cycle, Joe. And our capital allocation is really driven by our view on long-term fundamentals of supply, demand, alternatives, technology. And we deal with some of the shorter term things that can come with political cycles, but it doesn't drive capital allocation to nearly the degree that I think most people would suspect.
What do you think in terms of the Trump administration? You've talked about in Davos how everybody was coming into this thinking this was going to be a much more business-friendly administration. It hasn't worked out exactly the way a lot of people have planned on this, but is this a more business-friendly administration? What's your relationship?
Well, the question, you ask the question and it obviously immediately gets to a comparison. Right. And so the expectation was, because the last administration was very, very difficult for business, very, very difficult to engage and to communicate broadly across, all industries. The expectation was that this would be improved. I think one of the things, and I've said this publicly a number of times, the administration and people across the administration are engaged with the business community. That's constructive. There are certain things that have been put forward from a policy perspective that that don't feel in line with the expectation people had, but obviously we'll have to watch and see how the policy is implemented. watch and see how some of the stuff with the FTC plays out. But it's early days, and certainly it's hard to know exactly where that lands.
Anyone take the shorts or no? Let me see a show of hands. Let me see a show of hands.
I don't really think about administrations as being business friendly or not business friendly.
Walter, I thought you were walking away, man. What? I forgot. Different account. Okay. Are you following your trading plan is the question. You following the rules.
The economy, growth, and investment needs interaction between government and business. It's very, very important for economic growth, broadly. And so, hopefully that'll continue to be very constructive.
Joe?
Yeah, David, I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase this because I certainly don't want to be Pollyannish or cheerlead anyone who's close to retirement. This is gut wrenching, obviously, when you have close to a bear market in some of the major averages.
You get 2-3 months of selling, and all of a sudden it's a bear market. People. If you're retiring in the next 3 months, I understand it is stressful. You might have to push off retirement by a couple months, or just take the hit. We can explain that in a separate stream. But if we're going to look at the grand scheme of things and what these tariffs are doing to the chessboard, this 3 months or 4 months of retirement delay, I think we'll be okay.
And actually, do have one in some. But is there, in your view, is there a half full way to view any of this? I mean, the market, would you say that, 7 stocks led that market up 20% 2 straight years to highs. I don't know whether any of this was destined to happen anyway. We need corrections occasionally. Is any of it cathartic? And if we do, maybe not go scorched earth on tariffs, but if we go selectively and get some deals done, is it possible we're in a good place a year from now? Because there's so much pessimism now. People are writing off the next 4 years before that we're done with the first 100 days in terms of the economic record. Are you optimistic at all?
Well, I'm definitely optimistic when you step back and you take a broader view, Joe, because I continue to have enormous confidence in the U.S., the innovation in our economy, the forward on technology. When I look at what's going on with AI and the ability to deploy it in the enterprise and create massive productivity,
I'm not gonna lie, this is a side note. Out of all the finance, out of all the giants, we're talking Larry Fink at BlackRock, we're talking Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. If we're gonna look through the entire spectrum, I'd say David Solomon is one of my favorites. He kind of shoots it straight. Obviously, Goldman Sachs is, I want to say bulletproof, but they are a little too big to fail. And so he kind of has that, like, how do I say? They have fuck human. And so does JP Morgan, but they have a lot of commercial accounts. Goldman Sachs really just kind of relies on their ultra high net worth portfolio. But David Solomon, one of my favorites to listen to. If you guys go back and listen to some of his old, what are they, like, lectures and Q&As and press conferences he does, complete stud. Definitely somebody worth looking into. Him and Steve Schwartzman.
Across business broadly, massive productivity in our economy. When I look at the impacts that it can have around healthcare and health and wellness, these benefits, these are things to be enormously excited about. And so we had an extraordinary equity market, and as you point out, 7 stocks led the way. It's not surprising that something has rebalanced that. I did not necessarily expect it to be this in the form that it is, but certainly, and we did talk about this when we were in Davos.
I'm kind of the theory, and this is the last thing I'll interject with, but I'm of the theory that the Chinese were selling U.S. assets to kind of spite the U.S. for imposing the tariffs. The Chinese hold a significant amount of U.S. assets, both in the form of treasury bonds and equities. There's a lot of Chinese companies that are listed on U.S. stock exchanges that aren't necessarily following general accounting rules, and they're looking to get kicked off. So there's a lot of play here. If we kick off the Chinese companies, that's around $800 billion that gets wiped off the stock market. But that hit goes to the Chinese companies. And so this tit for tat thing, I think, is going to come to a close here very soon. I don't think that we can, keep this game going to completion, because China has already started their, trying to salvage the situation. They're calling all their international global partners, and they're telling them, don't take whatever deal the US is offering you because we're gonna come out on top of this, and you'd want to side with us. And the whole world is looking at China like this was cute two years ago. Biden was eating applesauce. He had applesauce for brains. This is different. This is Trump. All right. So you think that we're going to sit here and team up and play this monopoly money game? No. So you see, Vietnam came to the table. They're looking to drop their tariffs to zero. Argentina came to the table. Italy came to the table. These are folks that are, considered dropping, what does it say? Like unilaterally, all of their tariffs to zero. Or whatever the US wants. If it's a 10%, then they'll do 10% reciprocal. Those are people who want to play ball, according to the White House's terms. So I think China is running out of, they're running out of allies. Their economy is hurting. They have 145% tariffs on some of the most essential goods, and then up to 200% tariffs on manufactured goods like, manufactured parts for cars and some of the key exports that Trump is trying to bring back to the US. They're not going to be able to withstand this much longer. So this is like, who can take the pain longer? Because we have a deficit with them in terms of our trade balance. We're the net importer nation. We buy more stuff than we sell, and they're selling all their stuff so that they can like feed themselves. And so if we just don't want to buy stuff from the store anymore, guess what we do? We stay our ass home, right? Okay, it's bad, it could be worse. Now, what happens if they can't sell their stuff? They go sit their ass home? No, they need to sell their stuff. Otherwise, their economy can't run. Their entire society can't function. And so what they'll try to do is take some of these goods that they would have otherwise sold to the US and try to offload them in these other countries. Now, unlike the US, these other countries have half a brain. They're not going to let China sit there and just offload all their goods into their country, because most of these countries are manufacturers. They have local goods that they're trying to push, and the Chinese goods would come in and undercut the whole market. And so they're going to tell China, go fuck themselves, to say it bluntly. Excuse my French. Right? So then China's going to basically have no allies. They can't use the global monetary system because they're going to need dollars. You can't get away from the dollar no matter how hard you try. Okay, they tried to offload a bunch of bonds last week, right? To try to spite the US. Guess what happened? Who are you going to sell the bonds to? Somebody is going to pay you in dollars. If it's a US, if it's an entity in the US, they're going to pay you in dollars. If it's an entity in Europe, they're going to pay you in euros, but then the European entity is going to be stuck holding the bonds. So they're holding the US assets. You're not getting away from the US dollar. Okay, and so the more enemies and the more kind of strategic defense that we do to block China from creating these strategic alliances that they were very openly flaunting 2 years ago when Biden was in. All those people have ran to the hills. They're nowhere to be found. Now, there's some talks that Russia and China have been working together, supplying weapons, etc. That's yet to be seen. I don't think that media would really report on that unless there was like something concrete. But long story short, China has to fold. We have the cards. We can hold off on not buying new stuff way longer than they can hold off on not having a functional economy. And I think that this ends in the next 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Now, don't quote me on that. Come back and roast me if I'm wrong.
We talked about the robustness of the equity markets, and it's interesting to go back and kind of look at a basket of stocks and where they were 12 months ago. Obviously, the Magnificent Seven and that Nasdaq-led rally.
My favorite word, Nasdaq-led rally,
has certainly had a dramatic move. Right. But at the same point, there are lots of companies and stocks are up, versus where they were.
Goldman Sachs is up about 85% from a year ago.
A year ago. So, all of this has to be put in perspective. Right. I think the level of uncertainty is too high. Okay, it's not productive, and it's important that we have a clearer understanding of the direction of travel as soon as we can, so that businesses can plan, make investments, continue to help drive our economy forward. And
have you heard any CEOs, David, say, I mean, this is what we're hearing, that they had the rug pulled out from under them. And I mean, I think it's implied they'd actually go back if they voted for Trump and want to change their vote to Kamala Harris. Do you know any CEOs that say they missed the Biden?
I'm confused. If he's sitting right here, then who's guarding Gus Fring right now from getting attacked? That was a cheap listen. it's early in the morning. All right, it's the caffeine's still kicking. That was a Mike. That was a Breaking Bad joke for you guys. He was guarding Gus. The Salamancas, you know.
In terms of their approach to business?
I think, Joe, what I'm hearing from CEOs, from clients that I'm talking to, is they want to understand, they want to have more certainty with respect to what the policy is going to look like, where it's going to land, what deals are going to look like, so they understand the lay of the road, the lay of the land, and they can make adjustments if necessary in the way they run their businesses. You can't change these things. When you look at supply chains, when you look at where things are made, when you look at how these supply chains work, you can't change them in 5 minutes.
There was a question in there, David. Yes, Andrew, if there actually was a question in there, but you didn't answer the question. Do you know, are there a lot of CEOs saying, God, I sure wish I voted for Kamala, or I wish it was the Biden administration policies on business? Are we?
Well, that's the first real laugh you're going to get from a banker. All right, look at this. It's, do you wish that Kamala Harris would have won? This is the only genuine laugh you will see from David Solomon. Okay, are you guys ready for this? Prepare yourself. I'll make this big screen for you guys.
Question in there, David. Yes, Andrew, if there actually was a question in there, but you didn't answer the question. Do you know, are there a lot of CEOs saying, God, I sure wish I voted for Kamala, or I wish it was the Biden administration policies on business? Are we there yet? I don't think we're there.
Joe, when I'm talking to CEOs, we're talking about policy, we're talking about investment, we're not talking about people's election preferences.
Yo. Media training, man. Media training. Just that's that, bro. It's got to be numb. Your back has to hurt sitting on that fucking fence you're sitting on, man. The smile says it all. It's like, are things bad enough that people are wishing that we go back to the Biden policies, or that Kamala Harris would have won? Oh, God forbid. Bro, if Kamala Harris would have won. Okay, we're having some trade disputes with Lesotho. Okay? Shit, man, we're in trouble. No, if Kamala Harris was in, there'd be war between the Armenians would be back in war. The North and South Sudan be popping off. We'd have the who wait, no, I forgot. Whatever that Hotel Rwanda movie, that shit would pop back off. Though, are we wishing? You look at the smile, he still can't help himself from laughing. God forbid we had Kamala Harris. And I'm pretty sure they funded her campaign.
But you're not just worried about saying the wrong thing and incurring the wrath of President Trump at this point, are you, David?
No, I think I've been clear. We need a higher level of policy uncertainty. This level of uncertainty is not good. It's not healthy, and it's affecting investment spending and planning, and that will have an effect on growth in the economy. And we will see that, in my opinion, relatively quickly if we can't get to a higher level of certainty around this trade policy.
Uncertainty equals risk-off sentiment. Risk-off sentiment means that people are not going to buy stocks. Instead, they're going to go to something safer. But since the bond market is, everyone's kind of seeing the trend in bonds is dropping off. And so that used to be the number one safe haven, is you would basically go and lend the US government money and they will pay you back. Because if we don't have the money, guess what? We're going to print it. And because we're the global reserve currency, we're at liberty to print the money. Like, other countries have to make stuff to sell it to us for money. And we make money in order to buy stuff from our trade partners. Interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about money creation some other time. If you guys have taken the fundamentals course, we talked about money creation and how money is made in the economy today. I'm a big proponent of bringing small banks back. Bring back regional and district banks, because that was the backbone of the U.S. economy for a long time. Now, large-scale commercial banks, just like Chevron, just like the oil industry and the airline industry I talked to you guys about earlier, the commercial banking industry is getting consolidated too. We saw SunTrust and BB&T consolidate into Trueast, whatever the fuck it's called. That's going to be gone at some point too. So you'll have Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Chase. You'll have some small regional banks. You'll have Navy Federal and some other credit unions. But I think that putting an emphasis on small and regional banks is going to be way healthier for the economy because they can't leverage as much. They can't lend as much. These banks are creating money out of thin air, right? Like the Fed gives them, let's take a small regional bank, let's say $50 million, and then they're able to lend 10 to 1 on that. So now they're lending out $500 million worth of loans. And now that money gets paid back with real dollars. And they're just creating this money on balance sheet day in, day out. That's the money creation system. And it would be better suited for small regional banks to do that with small businesses because small businesses also employ the most amount of folks. They do make up, I think, over 65% of productive activity in America versus the large scale commercial banks giving billions and billions of dollars of, Series C and Series B funding to, already well capitalized technology companies. I think that we gotta make a massive shift here, and I don't think the Trump administration gives a fuck. So it's business as usual. Bankers will get rich. If you guys own Bitcoin, you might
What do
be
you think in terms of the
inflation
Trump administration?
resistance.
We
All right, let's see what else we got here. JD Vance speaking on India. This is actually really, really interesting. You guys know that I've been raving about India while everyone's talking about China being the #1 competitor and all this stuff. I'm telling you guys, I told you guys 2 years ago, last year, I'm telling you guys today, India is the country to watch. Demographically, China, because of the one-child policy, they don't have enough young people to run their machine. And so their standard of living is getting better. Their life expectancy is getting higher. So old people are living longer. So you need a bunch of young people to run this economy while the old people retire. Right? It's kind of how it works. Birth rates are going down, obviously, because there's not enough women. They were just trying to keep the men and they were trying to abort the women and all this shit. Guess what? Who are the men gonna mate with? Yeah, didn't think that one through. And so now there's a massive demographic problem where you have a massively like a fast rising elder population and not enough young people to run the economy. Well, conversely, in India, life expectancy ain't getting that much better. All right, they got a sanitation issue. They have let's just say the medical complex issue because it's a lot of fucking people you're trying to provide healthcare for. But then they have a thriving middle class and they have a thriving young population, which is also, unlike China, exporting their labor and their services to the rest of the world. All right. So while India is exporting these services, getting dollars into the country, and then basically backing their own currency with something valuable, China has basically gone with an isolationist policy where they're still exporting and they're still trading with the rest of the world on their terms. But they're not exporting their labor, like they're not doing call centers the same way that, let's say, India will. You guys get my drift? They will accumulate resources from the rest of the world happily, but they're not going to provide their labor. Well, I guess they are providing their labor, but I guess China is more of a manufacturing society and India is more of a service-based society. That's why you'll see typically call centers versus textile manufacturing in China. Or you'll see really IT and STEM massive in both countries. But the productive capacity is one is more physical manufacturing and the other one really is more, yes, they have some production in India. I would say some is being a massive, massive understatement. But their intellectual services are worth way more because you can do a call center and work for 3 different companies at the same time and be able to have contracts in different countries and different currencies way easier than you can set up 3, 4, 5 new factories and undercut the market and make a small margin. So I think that India, if they can get a hold on how to sustain this rising middle class and then be able to build some sort of stability in the country, which I don't fucking know how you would start to do that with 1.5 billion people. But I think Modi is the right president to do it. And if they're able to maintain peace long enough with their neighbors to build this middle class, I think they are the threat. They are the big kahuna to watch out for. So JD Vance talking about India.
Looks like
Let's see
JD.
what he's got to say. JD Vance's wife is Indian. Side note. So she's probably in his ear telling him how to do this correctly. So let's see how our VP did on the global stage.
As it looks like JD Vance is walking up to the podium.
Good to see everybody. How we doing?
And last thing I'll say before we let this video play here is I'm not in these shorts. I could see one more push up. This is about, let's call it 20 to 25 points. Okay, so there's a 20 to 25 point window here. If the market does not reject by the time it gets to the 200 mark and start to, wick back down, I would assume that buyers are going to keep taking price all the way up for the rest of the session. So, or at least until the second half of New York. So keep that in mind. About 25, 30 points. That's the gap where the market could reject.
Good, good. Well, it's an amazing privilege to be here in Jaipur. I'm thrilled to address the Ananta Center's India-US Forum, and I'm thrilled to have you all here with me. Thanks to all of you, the business leaders, decision makers, and of course the students for being here. And thanks to our great team at the U.S. Embassy for everything that you guys do for our country. In the United States, we're proud of the deep connection between our nations, between India and the United States. Prime Minister Modi, as most of you probably know, was one of the first visitors welcomed into the Oval Office during President Trump's second term. And like President Trump, the Prime Minister inspires remarkable loyalty because of the strength of his belief in his people and in his country. Now, we're so grateful for Prime Minister Modi's hospitality, as well as the reception that he and everyone else in this country have given us on this first trip for me to India. This is my first time visiting the birthplace of my wife's parents, and she's, of course, in the front row there. There you are, Isha. She's a bit of a celebrity, it turns out, in India, I think more so than her husband. But I haven't been here long, but already I've been fortunate enough to visit the Akshardham Temple. Did I pronounce that?
Let me tell you guys this I'm gonna give you guys my immigrant perspective. They're looking at her like you bagged this white dude, you bagged the VP of the US. They're looking at her front row. He used her name, right? He tried to throw her name for some street cred. They're looking at her. They're all looking at her like you got the bag. Y'all heard the claps go up?
Is that right, honey? I did okay. All right. With my family this morning, as a matter of fact, and last night, Prime Minister Modi welcomed me, Usha, and our 3 small children at his beautiful home. I've been amazed by the ancient beauty of the architecture of India, by the richness of India's history and traditions, but also by India's laser-like focus on the future. And those things, I think this appreciation for history and tradition and this focus on the future is very much something that I think animates this country in 2025. Now, in other countries I visited, it sometimes feels like there's a flatness, a sameness, a desire to just be like everyone else in the world. But it's different here. There's a vitality to India, a sense of infinite possibility, of new homes to be built, new skylines to be raised, and lives to be enriched. And there's a pride in being Indian, a feeling of excitement about the days that lie ahead. Now, it's a striking contrast with too many in the West, where some in our leadership class seem stricken by self-doubt and even fear of the future. To them, humanity is always one bad decision away from catastrophe. The world will soon end, they tell us, because we're burning too much fuel or making too many things or having too many children. And so, rather than invest in the future, they too often retreat from it. Some of them pass laws that force their nations to use less power. They
say poverty is the mother of invention. Yeah, maybe because in the West, we don't need to be hustle and bustle and to, work. And idle hands equals a busy mind. Busy hands equals a calm mind. When you're working because you don't have a choice, there's poverty in your country, you have to produce, you have to work. You don't have time to sit there and think about trying to conform to everybody else and having centric standards. Bollywood is bigger than Hollywood will ever be. And so, yeah, there's a hustle and bustle in these different countries. JD Vance, from the Appalachia, you got to get out more. Every country's got their culture except for the US. The US is losing it. And Europe. Europe, wake the fuck up. The US, still maintain. We don't even know what the culture of the US is. The definition changes, the goalpost moves. That's the US. We have ideals, we have the Constitution. We don't have a race or a culture. And that's kind of something that, we're trying to figure out in the great American experiment. But yeah, you travel anywhere else in the world, the Italians are Italian. Chinese are Chinese. And the Indians are definitely Indian. They're not trying to be French. I guarantee you that. And I hope that they don't. Oh, I was going to make such a fucked up. Damn. Refugee jokes off limit. That was going to be a banger. We were definitely going to get kicked off YouTube, but it was going to get some laughs and it would have been worth it.
Cancel nuclear and other energy generation facilities, even as their choice.
Oh, side note, we almost went to war with Iran, right? So Israel's trying to drag us into the 5th war in the region, as if Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Palestine wasn't enough. Now let's go for Iran too, one of the largest militaries in the region. Trump says no to the battle plans that Israel had drawn up to basically, they wanted to send missiles over to Iran and they wanted America to have their back. So basically your friend comes up to you at the bar. Let's just imagine you're 6'8". Your friend comes up to you at the bar and he's got this big plan, back of the napkin, drawn with some chick's lipstick. And he's just looking at you and he's like, dude, I'm going to go and slap the bouncer, right? And you see 5 or 6 of his buddies over there. They're all 6'5", tatted up to the eyelid. You're going to come help me because I'm going to go and I'm going to smack that guy. And America, being the 6'8" friend, goes, fuck no. All right, if you do that, you are on your own. And I think that's a very good position for America to take, which is let's try diplomacy. The Trump administration has been meeting with Iranian officials. They have been having unilateral talks. And so there's movement there. There's actual communication for once. We don't need to bomb. We don't need to go into another Iraq. We fucked up once. Shame on us. We do it. We let them drag us into another one. No. And so crisis was averted. Now, Russia, they're playing hardball. They're like, bro, we have all the chips. We don't want to end we don't want to end this war. The ceasefire talks are getting a little bit tense. So Trump's got a lot on his hands, but I do think that Trump is committed to peace through strength. And I really just hope that he stays on that path and talks some sense into Israel. Kind of reminds Israel who's in charge, because we are not going to get dragged into a whole regional world war, over something that can be handled diplomatically, which is just nuclear proliferation. Make sure Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. That's our demand. And Iran's going to have like 5 or 6 demands. They're going to say some stuff, get your bases out of this and dismantle this base over here so that they're not in proximity of this and whatever. And let's start some kind of agreement and some talks. If Israel starts sending rockets over there, I really hope we don't get involved, because that's just going to escalate into a regional war.
The choices of these leaders lead to more dependence on foreign adversaries. Meanwhile, their message to their friends, to countries like India, is to tell them that they're not allowed to grow. Well, President Trump rejects these failed ideas. He wants America to grow. He wants India to grow. And he wants to build the future with our partners all over the globe. And when I look at this audience, or when I visit this incredible country over these last couple of days, I see a people that will not be held back. Now, the most profound responsibility I believe that all of us have is not to ourselves, but to the next generation, to make sure we leave them with a better society than the one that our parents and our grandparents gave us. And this is the world that America seeks to create with you. We want to build a bright new world, one that's constantly innovating, one that's helping people to form families, making it easier to build, invest, and trade together in pursuit of common goals. Now, I believe that our nations have much to offer one another. And that's why we come to you as partners looking to strengthen our relationship. Now, we're not here to preach that you do things any one particular way. Too often in the past, Washington approached Prime Minister Modi with an attitude of preachiness or even one of condescension. Prior administrations saw India as a source of low-cost labor on the one hand, even as they criticized the Prime Minister's government, arguably the most popular in the democratic world. And as I told Prime Minister Modi last night, he's got approval ratings that would make me jealous. But it wasn't just India. This attitude captured too much of our economic relationship with the rest of the world. So we shipped countless jobs overseas, and with them, our capacity to make things, from furniture, appliances, and even...
Side note, that the challenge that I was doing yesterday on the live stream, in case you guys were on the live stream yesterday, I told you guys I would pass it by the end of the day. And this was yesterday at 10:52 p.m., right on the buzzer. 53K equity account. That challenge was passed. The one that we were trading yesterday on the live stream. I took the first trade with you guys, ended up trading throughout the day, and finished off with a couple hours to spare. I'm still seeing the reversal, but this thing is running pretty deep. Personally, if I was in the shorts, I would have closed by now, and I would just wait to re-enter at that higher zone, only because of how aggressive the market is pushing through those levels. Like it's still respecting. You guys, you see wick rejection here, then the market uses that resistance zone as support. So clearly it's still respecting this fib sequence, but it's still pushing very aggressively through the levels, meaning it's, if you have tight stop losses set, you're going to get hit. So I see this more of a liquidity grab than a continuation, but we won't know until we hit this 240 zone right here. So we got another 23 points. That's the moment of truth. Let's see how the market reacts to that level.
Weapons of war. We traded hard power for soft power because with economic integration, we were told, would also come peace through sameness. Over time, we'd all assume the same sort of bland, secular, universal values, no matter where you lived. The world was flat after all. That was the thesis, and that was what they told us. And when that thesis proved false, or at least incomplete, leaders in the West took it upon themselves to flatten it by any means necessary. But many people across the world, and I think your country counts among them, they did not want to be flattened. Many were proud of where they came from, their way of life, the kind of jobs they worked, and the kind of jobs their parents worked before them. And that very much includes people in my own country, the United States of America. Now, some of you are aware of my own background. I actually didn't plan to talk about my background at all until last night at dinner while my children mostly behaved. We gave them an A- for behavior with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister said, I have one request. I want you to talk a little bit about your background. And so I wanted to do that. For those of you who don't know anything about me, I wanted to talk about it. I come from, and I'm biased, the greatest state in the Union, the state of Ohio, a longtime manufacturing powerhouse in the United States of America. My home specifically is a place called Middletown. Now, it's not a massive city by any means. It's not Jaipur, but it's a decent sized town and a place where people make things, which has been a point of pride in Middletown for generations. It's filled with families like my own, some of whom called us hillbillies. Americans who came down from the surrounding hills and mountains of West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky to cities like Middletown in pursuit of the manufacturing jobs that were creating widespread prosperity for families all across America. They came to...
You guys imagine Kamala Harris making the same speech? Yeah, what almost happened in this country? You guys know that I stood 10 toes down against that nonsense. I went through her whole background, right? Mayor Brown. Everybody look up Mayor Brown, Kamala Harris. Like, you know what I'm saying? This guy is qualifying his sentences even. He said, I'm from this town and we make stuff. But some people called us hillbillies. Then he qualified the statement of hillbillies, explaining where the context came from. There's like fucking, 4D chess versus Connect Four that we would have been playing. This country would have fallen off a cliff. I'd be living in the Cayman Islands. I'd be in Peru. All right. People say, oh, I'd move out if Trump won. I'd move out if Trump won. You don't have a job. Blue-haired person on the street. How are you going to move out? With what? And I'm sitting here like, okay, well, if Kamala Harris wins, I would have actually moved out. I came here for the American dream, not this communist manifesto bullshit. You feel me? All right. If I wanted third world circumstances, I'd have stayed back home. All right. Now I love my people. That wasn't a dig. Love you. All right. All my Lebanese people. Shout out. Sells coming in shortly. Keep your eyes peeled.
To Middletown in search of what we call back home the American dream. In Middletown, my parents raised me. My grandparents raised me. They taught us to work hard. They taught me to study hard. And they taught me to love God and my country and always be good to your own. My granddad, who I called Papaw growing up, he typified that. Late into life, he worked as a steelmaker at the local mill. And I know India has a lot of them.
But doesn't it sound like you're trying to win class president? Doesn't it sound like a speech you're trying to win class president? My Papaw.
Papaw's job gave him a good wage, stable hours, and a generous pension. All that allowed him to support not just him and my grandmother, but his own daughter and grandkids with him. Now, by the time I came around, money was awfully tight, but he worked hard to make a good living for all of us. Now, I know Papaw and Mamaw were grateful for the way of life their country made possible. Their generation bore witness to the formation of America's great middle class. And by creating an economy centered around production, around workers who build things, and around the value of their labor, our nation's leaders then transformed their country and made thousands of little Middletowns possible. The government supported its labor force. We created incentives for productive industries to take root and struck good deals with international partners to sell the goods made in the United States of America. But as America settled into world historic prosperity it generated, our leaders began to take that very prosperity and what created it for granted.
Yeesh.
They forgot the importance of building, of supporting productive.
Yo, if you're not fully sold on being a patriot of the U.S., listen to this. This is making me proud.
Industry, of striking fair deals, and of supporting our workers and their families. And as time went on, we saw the consequences. In my hometown, factories left, jobs evaporated, America's middle towns ceased to be the lifeblood of our nation's economy. And the United States, as it became transformed, those very people, the working class, the background of the United States of America, were dismissed as backwards for holding on to the values their people had held dear for generations. Now, Middletown's story is my story, but it's hardly unusual in the United States of America. There are tens of millions of Americans who, over the last 20 or so years, have woken up to what's happening in our nation. But I believe they woke up well before it's too late. Now, like you, we want to appreciate our history, our culture, our religion. We want to do commerce and strike good deals with our friends. We want to found our vision of the future upon the proud recognition of our heritage rather than self-loathing and fear. I work for a president who has long understood all of this, whether through fighting those who seek to erase American history or in support of fair trade deals abroad. He has been consistent on these issues for decades. And as a result, under the Trump administration, America now has a government that has learned from the mistakes of the past. It's why President Trump cares so deeply about protecting the manufacturing economy that is the lifeblood of American prosperity and making sure America's workers have opportunities for good jobs. As we saw earlier this month, he will go to extraordinary lengths to protect and expand those opportunities for all Americans. And so today I come here with a simple message. Our administration seeks trade partners on the basis of fairness and of shared national interests. We want to build relationships.
About to say something very controversial. If you're sensitive, close your ears. If you have kids around, good for you, because they're getting the best information possible. I'm going to say this straight up. I'm a Lebanese immigrant to the United States. I love this country. I love both these countries. I love the United States. I'm going to say it straight up. I think we can all agree. It's nice to see the whites stepping back up. Look, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna be the first one to say it. I'll be the first one. It's nice to see the whites stepping back up, right? Shit's been working kind of slow. I'm just saying. Look, hey, look. Hey, I think he's doing a great job up there. All right. I think JD Vance has some potential for 2028, and I think he's earning his spot every day. Look, people, I it's just an opinion. All right.
Chips with our
I love Joe Biden. I love Hunter Biden's laptop. All of it. I took all the jabs.
foreign partners who respect their workers, who don't suppress their wages to boost exports, but respect the value of their labor. We want partners that are committed to working with America to build things, not just allowing themselves to become a conduit for transshipping others' goods. And finally, we want to partner with people and countries who recognize the historic nature of the moment we're in, of the need to come together and build something truly new. A system of global trade that is balanced, one that is open, and
this is the moment of truth. If we don't see rejections up here, we don't see massive wick rejections come back down, then bulls are likely going to take the market bullish at least until 2 p.m., at least until the second half of the session. So this is we got about 10 points between where price currently is and then where price could go before this thing is cooked. And so keep your eye on the trade and look out for those rejections. Respect, reject, and retest the zone. That's what we're looking for.
America has a friend, and we seek to strengthen the warm bonds our great nations already share. Now, critics have attacked my president, President Trump, for starting a trade war in an effort to bring back the jobs of the past, but nothing could be further from the truth. He seeks to rebalance global trade so that America, with friends like India, can build a future worth having for all of our people together. And when President Trump and Prime Minister Modi announced in February that our countries aim to more than double our bilateral trade to $500 billion by the end of the decade, I know that both of them meant it. And I'm encouraged by everything our nations are doing to get us there. As many of you are aware, both of our governments are hard at work on a trade agreement built on shared priorities, like creating new jobs, building durable supply chains, and achieving prosperity for our workers. In our meeting yesterday, Prime Minister Modi and I made very good progress on all of those points. And we are especially excited to formally announce that America and India have officially finalized the terms of reference for the trade negotiation. I think this is a vital step.
Let's go.
And I believe this is a vital step toward realizing President Trump's and Prime Minister Modi's vision, because it sets a roadmap toward a final deal between our nations. I believe there is much that America and India can accomplish together. And on that note, I want to talk about a few areas of collaboration today, how India and the United States can work together. First, perhaps most importantly, to protect our nations. Second, to build great things. And finally, to innovate the cutting edge technologies both our countries will need in the years to come. Now, on defense, our countries already enjoy a close relationship, one of the closest relationships in the world. America does more military exercises with India than we do with any other nation on earth. The U.S.-India Compact that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi announced in February will lay the foundation for even closer collaboration between our countries. From javelins to Stryker combat vehicles, our nations will co-produce many of the munitions and equipment that we'll need to deter foreign aggressors. Not because we seek war, but because we seek peace, and we believe the best path to peace is through mutual strength. And the launching the Joint Autonomous Systems Industry Alliance will enable America and India to develop the most state-of-the-art maritime systems needed for victory. It's fitting that India this year is hosting the Quad Leaders Summit this fall. Our interests in a free, open, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific are in full alignment. Both of us know that the region must remain safe from any hostile powers that seek to dominate it. Growing relations between our countries over the last decade are part of what led America to designate India a major defense partner, the first of that class. This designation means that India now shares with the UAE a defense
1.5 billion people and a nuclear superpower. Not a tough decision. The little Einsteins could have figured that one out. 1.5 billion.
technology infrastructure and partnership with the United States on par with America's closest allies and friends. But we actually feel that India has much more to gain from its continued defense partnership with the United States. And let me sketch that out a little bit. We, of course, want to collaborate more. We want to work together more. And we want your nation to buy more of our military equipment, which, of course, we believe is
The sales pitch in the middle of the diplomatic address. Buy more of our stuff.
the best in class. American fifth generation F-35s, for example, would give the Indian Air Force the ability to defend your airspace and protect your people like never before. And I've met a lot of great people from the Indian Air Force just in the last couple of days. India, like America, wants to build.
I've met a lot of people from the Air Force the last couple. But I have a black friend. But one of my friends is black. That was that, but diplomatically.
And that will mean that we have to produce more energy. It's more energy production and more energy consumption. And it's one of the many reasons why I think our nations have so much to.
Let me just give a quick shout out to Two Step, George. We got Christine. Christine, good to see you. I think a phone call. JLP is in the house. Brian Watts, good to see you. Carlos, welcome, welcome, welcome. George, Jacob, good to see you. Jacob, Jonathan, Joshua Weathers, Noah, Sam, Sandra, Tanny, and Jordan. Tanny or Jordan, one, both, or the other. Todd and Walter, of course. Walter, can't forget, save the best for last. Good to see you guys on the stream today, here on the Zoom, members only. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and throw them out. We're not answering YouTube questions. We're only doing Zoom questions. So if you guys want to take advantage of that privilege, go ahead and ask whatever you guys want. Any news events that are coming up or whatever it is, go ahead and throw those up in the Zoom. If you guys have a markup that you want to send out, put those in the Zoom as well. Let us see what you're looking at.
Gain by strengthening our energy ties. As President Trump is fond of saying, America has once again begun to drill, baby, drill. And we think that will inure to the benefit of Americans, but will also benefit India as well. Past administrations in the United States of America, I think motivated by a fear of the future, have tied our hands and restricted American investments in oil and natural gas production. This administration recognizes that cheap, dependable energy is an essential part of making things and is an essential part of economic independence for both of our nations. Of course, America is blessed with vast natural resources and an unusual capacity to generate energy, so much that we want to be able to sell it to our friends like India. We believe your nation will benefit from American energy exports and expanding those exports. You'll be able to build more, make more, and grow more, but at much lower energy costs. We also want to help India explore its own considerable natural resources, including its offshore natural gas reserves and critical mineral supplies. We have the capacity and we have the desire to help. Moreover, we think energy co-production will help beat unfair competitors in other foreign markets. But India, we believe, can go a long way to enhance energy ties between our nations. And one suggestion I'd have is maybe consider dropping some of the non-tariff barriers for American access to the Indian market. Now, I've talked about this, of course, with Prime Minister Modi. And look, President Trump and I know that Prime Minister Modi is a tough negotiator. He drives a hard bargain. It's one of the reasons why we respect him. And we don't blame Prime Minister Modi for fighting for India's industry, but we do blame American leaders of the past for failing to do the same for our workers. And we believe that we can fix that to the mutual benefit of both the United States and India. Let me give an example. American ethanol, we believe made from the finest corn in the world, can play a tremendous role in enhancing our partnership. And I know our farmers would be delighted to support India's energy security ambitions. We welcome the Modi government's budget announcement to amend India's civil nuclear liability laws, which currently prevent U.S. producers from exporting small modular reactors and building larger U.S. designed reactors in India. There's much that we can create, much that we can do together. We believe that American energy can help realize India's nuclear power production goals, and this is very important, as well as its AI ambitions. Because as the United States knows well, and I know that India knows well, there is no AI future without energy security and energy dominance. And that brings me to my final point of collaboration. I believe that the technological collaboration between our countries is going to extend well beyond defense and energy. The U.S.-India Trust Initiative that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have launched will be a cornerstone of the partnership in the future. It'll build on billions of dollars of planned investments that American companies have already announced across India. In the years to come, we're going to see data centers, pharmaceuticals, undersea cables, and countless other critical goods being developed and being built because of the American and Indian economic partnership. And I'll say it again, I think that our nations have so much to gain by investing in one another. America investing in India, and of course, India investing in the United States of America. And I know that Americans, our people, are excited about that prospect, and that President Trump and I are looking forward to stronger ties. Americans want further access to Indian markets. This is a great place to do business, and we want to give our people more access to this country. And Indians, we believe, will thrive from greater commerce for the United States. This is very much a win-win partnership. It certainly will be far into the future. And as I know this audience knows better than most, neither Americans nor Indians are alone in looking to scale up their manufacturing capacity. The competition extends well beyond cheap consumer goods and into munitions, energy, infrastructure, and all sorts of other cutting-edge technologies. I believe that if our nations fail to keep pace, the consequences for the Indo-Pacific, but really the consequences for the entire world, will be quite dire. And this, again, is where India and the United States have so much to offer one another. We've got...
So I'm sending out updates in the Discord for chart addicts members, but this is what I want you guys to pay attention to. On the Awanda chart, there's a gap here. This thing will load. I think it's pushing up to fill the gap before we continue down. So you guys can see the gap over here. And so the resistance of the gap is at 250. Let's see where we're at. About 280. That's about 30 points away from the current price. And so if we fill the gap and then reject back down, there's a very good chance that we're pulling all the way back. If we fill the gap to the upside and close above the gap high, so like the gap high becomes a support, that's the black line right here. This gets broken and the market closes above and then uses that as support, then the market's just going to continue to the upside. We're going to hit these extension levels that line up perfectly with price action over here. And there's plenty of gaps that have been forming. Now, clear the Awanda, the CFD chart is the only one that has these gaps reflected. I've looked at the futures charts. They're all solid, but these gaps are pretty useful just to kind of show you where the market hasn't rebalanced yet. And so gaps will get filled at some point. These gaps up here, 18,800, that's about 500 points away. There's at some point, whether it's an inverted head and shoulders that the market forms with a massive retest, whether it's just a continuation and a break of this high, this gap will get filled. And so with that same logic, we go down to the smaller timeframes. This gap could get filled, and then if there's going to be a rejection, then it'll reject from that high to the downside. Now, I did not enter that 88.6 trade, but I'll be honest, if I see a rejection here at this double top, I'm probably going to enter that short. Just throwing that out there. Okay.
Great hardware, the leading artificial intelligence hardware in the world. You have one of the most exciting.
Christine, I did not say I'm happy the whites are taking over. Do not put words in my mouth. I did not say taking over. I just said waking back up. Because let's be honest. Like the story of, White people becoming a minority everywhere. They're about to elect Conor McGregor as president in Ireland. Everyone's talking about the same thing, but it's not really a race thing. It's just more so like nationalism kind of thing. And this kind of goes back to the whole, what is it called? That saying that I always say, that if socialists don't secure their borders, then fascists will. And I think that's what we're seeing now. I said this on the stream yesterday, like you need a pendulum swing back into the right direction. But with the whole whites thing, look, man, America's the shit. Bro. We gotta stop talking. We gotta start repping it, bro. We got white people out here talking good about America. We're coming back. Don't you say Hispanics? Well, I don't bro. I'm with everybody, bro. I told you guys this before. I'm an equal opportunity hater. I hate everybody. I'm just a miserable bastard. That's what I am. And I love everybody at the same time. The comments, I'm gonna stay out of this. You know what? I've learned my lesson. All right. I plead the fifth.
Startup technology, infrastructures anywhere in the world. There's a lot to be gained by working together. And this is why President Trump and I both welcome India's leadership in a number of diplomatic organizations, but of course in the Quad. We believe a stronger India means greater economic prosperity, but also greater stability across the Indo-Pacific, which is of course a shared goal for all of us in this room, and it's a shared goal for both of our countries. I want to close with one last story, or maybe a couple of stories. So, you know, my son Ewan is 7 years old. He's our firstborn son. And yesterday, after we had dinner at the Prime Minister's house, the food was so good, and the Prime Minister was so kind that Ewan came up to me afterwards and he said, "Dad, you know, I think maybe I could live in India." But I think after about 90 minutes in the Jaipur Sun today at the Great Palace, he suggested that maybe we should move to England. So you take the good with the bad here. But I want to talk about Prime Minister Modi because I think he's a special person. I first met Prime Minister Modi at the AI Action Summit in February. And we had a lot of important discussions on AI and other policies to prepare for. The Prime Minister also managed to figure out that my son Vivek was actually turning 5 years old on the trip. This was in Paris just a couple of months.
My son Vivek, after he sunned him in the election results, is crazy. His son's name is Vivek. That's crazy. And he sunned him on the debate stage. You can't even make that up. Well, there was something else. Shit, dude. Kamala Harris's dad's name was Donald. I don't know if you guys knew this or not. We're talking about some shit. Like Kamala Harris's dad name was Donald, and it was Donald something Harris. It was like the very similar initials. Crazy. JD Vance said, "My son Vivek." Wild. Clip that.
Ago. So think about this. Amid a huge international policy conference, he took the time to stop by where I was staying, wish our second son, Vivek, a happy birthday, and even bring him a gift. Ush and I were both genuinely touched by his graciousness, and we've been even more impressed by his warmth since we arrived in India. Now, it's interesting. Some of you may know that when you're a politician, your kids spend almost as much time in the limelight as you do, and the great things about kids is they are brutally honest. They're brutally honest with everybody, whether you want them to be or not. And our 7-year-old, our 5-year-old, and then our 3-year-old baby girl, Mirabelle, it's interesting. They've only really attached themselves to, they've only really liked, I should say, they've only really built a rapport with two world leaders. The first, of course, is President Trump. He just has a certain energy about him. But Prime Minister Modi, it's the exact same thing. Our kids just like him. And I think that because kids are such good, strong of characters, all
right, take it easy, Walter. Be easy.
Like Prime Minister Modi too. And I think it's a great foundation for the future of our relationship. I could tell when Prime Minister Modi came over a couple of months ago. And I believe today that he is a serious leader who has thought deeply about security, not just for the rest of his time in office, but over the next century. And I want to end by making a simple overarching point. We are now officially 1/4 into the 21st century, 25 years in, 75 years to go. And I really believe that the future of the 21st century is going to be determined by the strength of the United States-India partnership. I believe, thank you.
People, mark my words. I've been saying this for years. America and India. It ain't Russia. It ain't Iran. It ain't China. It ain't Brazil. Right? In the 80s, it was Japan that was going to overtake the US and have a dominance in GDP. It's US and India. Because India's kind of like a neutral third party in between all these different conflicts. They have a vested interest in keeping commercial partnerships with all the countries. So they're kind of like they're talking to the Ukrainian government and the Russian government, and they're talking to the Israeli government, and they're talking to the Palestinian government. They are the perfect neutral party. China, being an isolationist, makes you need to take a side, because there can't be the U.S. hegemony around the world. There has to be this sort of like bipolar power structure between us and China. If they're going to be isolationists, you have to choose one or the other. Now, with India, they can integrate into the global system. Currently, Indians are limited in what they can do in terms of, like, let's say, Forex trading. They can't trade external markets. They want to keep their local currency in the country so they can kind of give it value. They can stop some sort of like currency flight out of the country and sort of devaluation of the currency where they have to print more. And so right now, they're not playing isolationist, but they're kind of doing what Trump is trying to do, which is being protectionist. So I should just kind of like show you guys the difference. A globalist is somebody that doesn't really believe in borders, believes in just like the globe is the globe and there's no borders and we all trade and all IP is limitless and everything is sort of open. Then you have, let's say, an isolationist would be, we don't want to work with the rest of the world. We're going to shut our economy off. We're going to create these very stringent rules and barriers around our economy, our society, and our government. And that way we can kind of like do our own thing. That doesn't work because the globe, like the world, is becoming increasingly more interconnected. And so globalization is kind of like the dominant direction that it's all headed. You have to have a mix of both. China kind of forgets the only reason that they went from 90% of their population being under the global poverty rate in the 90s to now being on par with the US, looking to overtake the US, is not because of communism. It's because they embraced capitalism for 30 years and they were able to build their economy up. But now that their economy is at such a large scale, they had to control it somehow. And communism seems to be like that central authority, keeping everybody on the same page kind of method to, keeping this big thing alive. It's not going to work. So long story short, America is going to win. With India, you don't have to pick a side. You can choose both. You can choose manufacturing from India. You can choose intellectual property from the US. Perfect partnership. We can take advantage of kind of like lower cost labor from India, but then kind of bring some of the intellectual property and the manufacturing and some of like the smaller manufacturing back home. So we're not so reliant on an external party. Like right now, we're reliant on China for medicines, for strategic materials, for car parts. Like they could destabilize our entire economy off a flip of a switch. Now it's kind of like in chess, sacrificing your queen and take the queen, or like it's mutually assured destruction. If they do that, then they're also going to go down with us. But you don't want one of your strategic adversaries to have that much control over you. And so India, it would kind of be a 50-50. They would produce probably a lot of like the mass volume textiles and those sort of like manufacturing things. What we call them like widgets and doodads, right? Those little fucking, and then in the US, you would sort of build things that are more of a national security interest. So let's say like cars is the number one thing that Trump is trying to bring back. I would say cars, medicine, food, and raw materials, right? So we're trying to become the net steel exporter, which I believe we are, but we're trying to like really ramp up the steel export. But Those are like medicine cannot be controlled by. We saw what happened with COVID. Just sitting there waiting for China, who basically lied to the whole world for 3 months, while all of their domestic airports were shut down. All their international airports were still open, and basically just kind of hiding this thing. You can't let somebody like that have control over your nation's health and wellness. That's preposterous. We'll listen to JD Vance's closing remarks here, and then we're ready to head off. I'm kind of blown. I feel like in the 20 minutes after we hop off the stream, this thing is going to melt and I'll look like a genius, but I have other things to do. So we're going to listen to this last remark for a minute and a half and then call it a stream. Appreciate you guys for hopping on. Drop a like if you guys have to hop off and shit. Your boss is walking behind you. You got to pretend to do work while you're scrolling on Facebook Marketplace. Hit the thumbs up button, people. It'd mean the world to us and the team.
I believe that if India, that the future of the 21st century is going to be determined by the strength of the United States-India partnership. I believe, thank you. I believe that if India and the United States work together successfully, we are going to see a 21st century that is prosperous and peaceful. But I also believe that if we fail to work together successfully, the 21st century could be a very dark time for all of humanity. So I want to say it's clear to me, as it is to most observers, that President Trump, of course, intends to rebalance America's economic relationship with the rest of the world. That's going to fundamentally will cause profound changes within our borders in the United States, but of course with other countries as well. But I believe that this rebalancing is going to produce great benefits for American workers. It's going to produce great benefits for the people of India. And because our partnership is so important to the future of the world, I believe President Trump's efforts, joined, of course, by the whole country of India and Prime Minister Modi, will make the 21st century the best century in human history. Let's do it together. God bless you, and thank you for having me.
All right, let's bring in our next guest.
Look, I'll just say, it's no wonder the stock market is pumping. After that closing,
It's all away.
no. After those closing remarks from JD Vance, I'm ready to bid stocks up. I'm ready to hop on Robinhood and full margin on NASDAQ futures after that closing argument. Wow. Now, with that being said, moment of truth. Like I said, for the members, I put my comments in the Discord group. If you guys want to read those, basically what I think is happening here with this chart, it's the moment of truth. This is the moment of truth. We're looking at this on a 30-minute time frame, if I'm not mistaken. 30-minute time frame. So we have about 5 minutes left in this current candle, and then the next candle is going to be sort of the deciding factor. So between now and noon, between now and 12 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to have our answer. Even if the market closes above our sell zone, that 88 zone, the retest could still pull back through. And so between now and the next 35 minutes, if you guys are in these shorts or looking to unwind these shorts, that's going to be your timeline for what to look for. Okay. So 35 more minutes, you guys will have your answer. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for pulling up to another incredible live stream. This one ran longer than usual. Sheesh. Make sure to drop a like. Make sure to drop a comment. Make sure to hit subscribe on the channel. It would mean the world to us and the team. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Another Market Open live stream. Take it easy. Peace.